Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today with you. And because we're a little bit tight on time, I'm going to jump right in and start sharing my screen. And then we'll try to have some questions, Q&A at the end. So that now, can you see that, everybody? Great. Okay, so, you all know this game of Frisbee. This is not Air Bud. We were having a joke about that yesterday. But you throw a plastic disc in the air and someone or a dog catches it. But what most people don't know is that the original Frisbee wasn't designed to be a toy. Frisbee pies made amazing pies. And they also made the pie tins that these pies were baked in. And according to legend, the kids figured out that the pie tins were aerodynamic and began to toss them around. And with that, a sensation was born. As product leaders, as creators, as CEOs, we all want people to love what we create. But sometimes people just use our products in ways we could never have predicted. And once we release our product, it kind of no longer belongs just to us. It belongs to our users. And most of us become creators because we love to create. We are makers at heart. But leadership, product leadership, is more than making something amazing and sharing it with the world. True leadership and true product leadership involves taking responsibility for the ways in which people use our products. And it requires vision and understanding of human nature and evolving cultural norms, a sense of observation, and an ability to accept and own the impact our products have on the world. The stakes are particularly high in tech, where the products we create can reach billions of people, and usually before we're ready for that to happen. So product leadership is actually product stewardship. Over the past few years, we have become painfully aware of what can happen when politics and media outlets encourage our worst instincts and amplify the worst and virulent voices amongst us. A couple of years ago, the New York Times wrote an in-depth investigation into the increase of violence by white supremacists and far-right extremists. The reporter, Janet Reitman, was able to put together some figures that supported what many of us have been feeling, a sense that domestic terrorism in America was getting worse, vitriol on social media was getting even worse, and was inciting violence, attacks on people of color, gay people, non-Christian people, immigrants, refugees. Reitman wrote that white supremacists and other far-right extremists have killed far more people since September 11th than any other category of domestic terrorism or extremism. The number of terror-related incidents has more than tripled in the United States since 2013, and the number of those killed has quadrupled. In 2017, there were 65 incidents and 95 deaths. And these stats don't even include the past 3 years because I wasn't able to find data for the past 3 years. And that statement is telling in itself because a number of things have happened. With the massacre in Pittsburgh, and more recently, the killings of our Black citizens. With our own president cheering on violence on social media. When I was at eBay, we prided ourselves on being a well-lit place to trade. You may be familiar with the founding story. Pierre Omidyar created an online marketplace for his then girlfriend so she could trade Pez dispensers. It was all very cute. eBay's marketplace evolved into an engine of entrepreneurial growth. The company's mission was to empower people by connecting millions of buyers and sellers around the world and creating economic opportunity. eBay's marketplace eBay's mission was to empower people by connecting millions of buyers and sellers around the world and create global economic opportunity, I think, as I just said. But that was the intention. And as we scaled, people began to use eBay in ways we hadn't predicted. A part of our ongoing management of the platform, we would look at usage patterns. We noticed, for example, that people were selling cars. And with that, eBay Motors was born. We also noticed, though, that some people were trading disturbing items, including swastikas, Nazi memorabilia, and other items. As a management team, we talked about how to handle it, and the conversation led to some existential questions. Who are we? What do we believe? Why did we create this product? And most importantly, what do we want to enable, and what do we want to help create in the world? Once we framed it in the terms of our values, the decision about what to do became very clear. We decided to ban all Nazi memorabilia, along with other hate-related propaganda. Everything that bore symbols of the Nazis, SS, or KKK, music and movies that promoted hatred and racial supremacy, and Holocaust denial books. This was not a case of scrubbing content to reflect puritanical values. I mean, after all, eBay is also used to buy and sell porn. We just refused to let eBay's marketplace be used as a tool by people who wanted to hurt other people. It's very simple. That is not who we wanted to be. There are many ways to enable hate groups. One is by giving them a megaphone. Another is by giving them safe haven. In the weeks leading up to that Unite the Right march that we saw, there was a steady drumbeat aiming to get as much attention from the media as possible. Airbnb was actually paying attention. They noticed that a lot of people who planned to attend the rally were also planning to stay at Airbnbs, and they didn't want to enable white supremacists. They figured out which users were planning to attend the rally and canceled their accounts. Airbnb's mission of belonging means that members of the Airbnb community accept people regardless of their race, religion, national origin, ethnicity, disability, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, or age. And Airbnb's leadership team made sure their product lives by the same values. Airbnb not only wants to keep the bad people out, they want to encourage good behavior, and they do it through product. In this slide, this was in 2017, June, they launched Open Home, a way for people to help refugees by giving them a place to stay. This wasn't just a marketing stunt. They invested in building a new product marketplace that allowed people to offer their homes for free to refugees and victims of disaster. Now, for all the many ways that technology makes the world better, it has also made some things worse. I think we can all relate to this image where we are together, but really not. And there's tons of research about the negative impact of screen time. It makes it harder to learn, causes us to perform poorly, leads to memory loss. I mean, I can tell you my short-term memory, and my teammates who affirm, is pretty short. But we don't call this addiction, we call it gamification, because we want our products to be engaging. Because the platforms where people spend the most time become the most valuable, and we insert reward systems, little jolts of dopamine, so users come back more frequently, spend more time, spend more money, invite their friends. And this isn't new. You know, video game companies have been doing that for decades. credit card companies and retailers have too. So why is the technology harder to resist now? Because it's always with us, in our pockets, on our wrists, in our hands. And it's hard to resist temptation when it's literally tethered to you and you tether it to yourself. Think about, pull to refresh or continuous scroll. It's really brilliant. The content never stops. And it really reminds me of something where each time you pull, you don't know what you're going to get next. A photo, an ad, something from your friend. And the creator of that product, Pull to Refresh, is having serious second thoughts. He said, I've spent many hours and weeks and months and years thinking about whether anything I've done has made a net positive impact on society or humanity at all. He blocked certain websites, turned off push notification, and is cutting back on phone usage. Study after study shows that we actually have no willpower, zero. We're weak and we can't expect it to say no. If we want to break an addiction, we have to change our environment. And the only people who can help us are the people who build the products, which is actually us. Apple has taken some great measures in screen time, but when I last took a poll on this, almost no one had turned on screen time, and those who had turned it on were actually not using it to change their behavior at all. But it's interesting why they released it. Johnny Ive said, there's a responsibility to try and predict as many of the consequences as possible. It's part of the culture at Apple to believe that the responsibility does not end when you ship a product. So as creators, as product people, as people in the tech industry, we're taught that our job is to experiment. And as technologists, many of us are optimists, and we should be, right? We joined this industry because of the positive ways technology can solve some of the world's biggest problems. And there's a lot of good in tech. But as products evolve, there's potential for things to happen, whether intended or not. And the question is, what do you do when you see it? Do you shrug and say, you didn't see it coming? Or do you do something about it? People in tech and product people are doers, builders, problem fixers. I look at this group of close to 150 people, and you are sharp, talented, influential creators. You control the destiny of some of the world's most loved products and some of the world's most loved products to come. You all know as well as I do that technology products can get misused. And we have the power to fix many of these things. Okay, so we've been talking about this for long enough. I want to give you a set of tools and a handful of steps that I took a stab at towards regaining some control over the way our products live in the world. Step one, define. So before you begin designing, sit down with your team and define how you want your product to be used. Define the moral lines of what people should and shouldn't be able to do with your products. And when you do this, you'll know where your line in the sand is. Document that line in the sand. And drawing this line up front will provide you a lot of clarity so that when the world changes around you, and it will, if anything, 2020 has proved that it will, your line doesn't change as the world around you changes. Step two, imagine. Imagine all the shit that people can do with your product. Ask everyone on your team to imagine the worst possible scenarios. Now, this isn't easy because we're not bad people, but it's worth thinking about what are the unintended consequences that might come up. Don't assume only well-intentioned people will use your product. Imagine what would happen if the very worst person you've met got your hands on your product. And how can you provide incentives to people to use your products in quote unquote the right way, the way you intended, and penalize those who don't? Step 3, communicate. Share your beliefs, values, and intentions with everyone on the team. If a stranger were to come in and ask anyone how your product should and shouldn't be used, your entire team should be able to give the same answer. This also ensures that you have buy-in and everyone's on the same page, morally. Instead of making hard decisions when things are blowing up, you've already agreed on where you stand. And step 4 is measure. Product people, tech people, engineers measure everything. How can you measure the ways people are misusing your product? What are the early warning systems that you could put in place? When you're a startup, you could be forgiven for missing the subtle signs that someone's abusing your product. But with success, and as you grow, less so. Review the data, review the signals it's sending you at least once a quarter.
Yeah. I had a corona test and I also had an antibody test.
Whoa, okay. And finally, do something. There will always be unexpected surprises. But since you already know where your moral line in the sand is, when you see something that crosses that line, you know it and you can take action. Technology should enhance human connection. It should help make the world better. And you, as leaders of your companies, can make that happen. Because product leadership and leadership is product stewardship. And the first step is for all of us to begin to see this and live our values. Thank you very much. And now I'm on my iPad, so let me figure out how to stop the broadcast and come back to you guys. There we are.
All right, thank you so much, Shripriya. That was great and very timely and thought-provoking, so really appreciate that. Audience, now is the time for you to ask questions if you have any. If you haven't already, drop them into the Zoom chat. When it's your turn, we'll message you privately, call out your name, and then unmute you so you can ask your question live. And please try to turn on your video. Our first question, if we're ready, comes from Irina Pozlovsky. Irina?
Hi, good morning. So my question is, when you do a new product release, how do you tie that in with press releases to let the general public know this is coming and also contain the information that's being shared with the general public about those releases? And how did you capture metrics?
Yeah, so, we didn't really do press releases, and I think press releases are really not a way in which your users get information about your products. The way we did, and the way I recommend all of you let your users know that there are new features, is to message your users through the product, right? The expectation that they should go somewhere else to learn about your product is usually not the best, right? So you should have a community board or an update site where your users can learn about your product, or even an in-app notification, right? If it's an app or a website where you say, hey, here are the new products, here's what's coming. And then the second part of the question was, do you want to control the information?
Well, with respect to, say, the eBay platform, when you made changes not to sell Nazi memorabilia, and that's where my question is really pointed to, is that type of communication to let the general public know that you have made that type of blanket decision with respect to the vision of the product and drawn a line between selling porn is okay, but Nazi memorabilia is not, and telling the public why.
Yeah, so I think for that we did have a press release, and we basically to make their own decisions. Our adult category was always separate from the general search. So if someone wanted to search for porn, they could go to the adult category and search for it, but it wouldn't show up in your general search if your 13-year-old was searching for Beanie Babies, right? And so we did make a press release about it, and we said pretty much what I said, which is we don't believe in enabling hate. We don't believe in allowing one group of people to harm another group of people. And that's why we stopped that. It was covered by the press because, eBay at that time was a public company and it was a big decision. So yeah, we did release that and we were very open about why we did it. You look now at companies and how they're putting their information out, Facebook, Twitter, they publish it, they do media interviews. And they are scared. They're scared, nervous, and they are not being moral leaders that we need in the world. And they have way more users than eBay ever had, right? Because eBay was a trading platform. This is a communication platform. Communication platforms always have more users than trading platforms. But yeah, we did put out press releases. We communicated it very clearly, just like how I did. And it was covered. There were obviously people who disagreed. We were okay with them disagreeing. So.
I used the platform back in the 90s, so.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irina, for that one.
Thank you, Irina.
Our next question comes from Suhaila. Suhaila, are you able to unmute?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. Shripriya, this is, I'm calling from India, so it's almost night here. So I'm going to keep my video off since I'm almost tucked in. But what I'm going to quickly try and ask is, what if you as the, innovator or the startup founder understand the burning need of your solution because of your expertise of having worked in the field, but the product seems a little ahead of its time for, maybe the community who you are putting it out there for, given, maybe the existing market conditions, the government policy frameworks. And I think a good example might be Apple, but I'm sure there are many more out there, who kind of made products before people even, envisaged them. So what's your take on, and I myself am a startup founder, I'm working on a digital health product, and I'm very often confronted with this question here in India, that, it seems a little ahead of its time. So how exactly do you think a founder can sort of tackle with that sort of, challenging mindset sometimes?
Yeah, that's a great question. As investors, one of the questions we ask ourselves is this too ahead of its time, right? And we have seen amazing products fail because they're maybe 10 years early. Now, I think 10 years early is too early, but being a year early or 2 years early is okay because it does take time. We all hear the stories about how startups just take off. They actually don't just take off. There's a lot of work that goes on before they slowly start getting, they get their first 100 users and then their first 1,000 users. And then people are talking and there are things they love, there are things they want to see changed. The company makes changes and it slowly takes off. So if you think your product is a little bit ahead of its time for where it needs to be, I would focus on the first 100 users. Focus on the first 100 users. Try to get first 100 users who are total devotees of your product. They're obsessed with it. It helps them. They use it all the time. They are, without your asking, sending you product feedback. They're evangelizing your product to other people. And then once you have them, focus on your 500 and then focus on your 1,000. And when you start getting to about 1,000, really, real users who care deeply about the problem that your product is solving, you're on that cusp of explosive growth, right? Because from 1,000 to 10,000 is not as hard from 0 to 100. And so focus on the first 100, figure out how you can get it to meet them where they are today, and then grow from there.
Sure, thank you for that.
Thank you so much for staying up for this. I really appreciate it.
It's been a great talk, a great series of sessions till now, and yesterday too. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suhaila. Our next question comes from Fernando. Fernando, are you able to?
Yep, I'm right here. All right, you guys can hear me okay? All right, thank you guys so much for doing this, and Shripriya, thank you so much for taking the time. So my question really is around product or feature releases. So as an early stage, you know, we're constantly obviously releasing new features, creating new features, and we need to, you know, release them for testing at some point. So what would you say around releasing, you know, incomplete features or features that are still being worked on for testing publicly for testing with your customers in order to get that feedback? Is that something you would recommend doing, or just kind of waiting for a stage of more, you know, more completion?
You know, it really depends on the stage, right? Like if you're early and you know that users want this product, and if you have that trust with your users, right? You're like, hey guys, this, or hey folks, this feature is not done. Would you like us to release it now so you can give us feedback? Here are the things, here are the rest of the things we've planned for this that will be coming. If you have a trusted community where they're like, yeah, let's go for it. Like, you know, I'll give you an example, like a Notion or a Roam, right? These are just tools in the productivity space, but they have a very passionate user base. And I would say even if products are not feature complete, some of their users would be like, yeah, I totally want it. So, and then if you can allow people to opt in to try, that's even better. Because, you know, you have to beta products, right? And, or alpha products. So you can find a passionate user group that says, I'm signing up for alphaing or betaing your product. I'll give you input as long as you know that it's just one user's point of view. And they're willing to take the risk of alphaing or betaing that product, go for it. Because there's no better feeling for you to have those passionate users. And I am a beta tester for a number of software products even now. I'll reach out to the founders and be like, hey, I'm raising my hand, I want to be on your beta. And it feels great because I can beta this stuff. I have access to stuff before anyone else. I love it. I know it can cause dramatic failures. And so I just take the necessary steps to back up.
Understood. So. And as a quick follow-up, would you recommend even maybe trying to frame it in that way of being like you're a pioneer, you're like, you know, a first adopter kind of?
Totally. I mean, the only thing I'd be careful about is if you're going to wipe a database, let them know that that's a risk, right? So if they're going to lose all their data, they should know. But framing it as this cool thing they can participate in always works, even on VCs who say like, yeah, I want to be your beta tester.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Sure.
Really appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Fernando.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Fernando. I think we have time for one last question, and that will be from Craig Fisk.
Okay, thanks for the topic, Shripriya. My question really had to do with marketplaces when operating across cultures and across language differences. I'm thinking specifically of, you know, sort of a benign case. Back in the day when I was at Intel, we developed a software product that beeped when you made a mistake. And it turned out that that was a real problem in Japan because that meant that you were doing something wrong. But it was highly desired of the US. And you have that kind of thing across all kinds of product areas. Do you have an idea about how you handle that in terms of your tools?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And you know, it's hard. I would say that as you grow, you definitely have to be able to have different versions of your product that are appropriate for the cultures in which you operate, right? Okay. So Japan's really different from Germany, which is really different from India, is really different from the US. And so, you know, one of the things I've seen go well is you have the base code and then you have localized versions that actually tweak things based on the culture in which you're operating. And it goes even to price, right? Because, you know, a user in India, $19.99 is a huge amount of dollars. You know, it is here too, but $4.99 is a huge amount of money, right? And so the localization has to be really thoughtful, and it's best to do it with in-country staff if you're getting that big. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, one of the problems we as American companies have, and why a lot of American companies have failed in Japan and in China, is because we do not understand the culture as well as we think we do. you know, and
Yeah.
the local staff are the ones who really do understand it. And we should have local staff, and we should pay attention to their concerns when we're thinking of launching in the country.